Well, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Make America Civil Again. This is the final installment of Being Black in America, and backed by popular demand is my oldest brother, Michael. So, Michael, welcome back. Thanks for being with me again.
It's good to be here. All right, let me remind everybody that I do look a little bit better than this stud, of course, but my younger brother, so naturally I become the better looking one, but please, go ahead.
All right. Anyway, so today we're going to talk about my brother's experience as African American here in America. But before we begin, I always want to say like, share, and subscribe. So this is the second time my brother Mike's been on Make America Civil Again. The first time we talked about education in America and how we can reform it, and just some of the history of education and kind of how it evolved over time. So you guys can always find that video here on my YouTube channel. But Mike, for all those who are new, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I obviously, his older brother, born and raised in Las Vegas. I have two young kids, two toddlers, might have you. I've been married for about 5.5 years or so. Again, Las Vegas native, lived in Southern California for some time, but that's probably just a general overview. I work in corporate finance now and enjoy that work, so yeah.
So can you express a little bit what it was like being Black growing up in America, specifically in Las Vegas?
Right. I think because we live in Las Vegas and on the West Coast, there seems to be a little bit more, there's probably more of an exposure, if you will, to different races or different ethnic groups and different cultures of that type. It doesn't take away from moments where I was racial profiled in certain situations, which I'm sure you have been as well. I came from a middle class household, and that in itself gave us a entirely different experience than maybe minorities that are born into a lower class. Speaking for a middle class Black man on the West Coast, if you talk to someone that maybe lives in the South or the Midwest that's poor, that's probably a different story.
So we grew up middle class, you know, did pretty well. We went to private school a little bit.
Yes, we did.
But I went to private school my whole life. Right? I never experienced public school, but you did. So do you want to talk a little bit about the difference between going to public school and going to private school?
Yeah, there's a few. One was just the education, right, if I'm honest. Number two was class size was different. At private school, you think about it, everyone's middle class, upper middle class, to even higher class. The school that I went to at the time, it was in a lower socioeconomic area. So predominantly the people that I went to school with, the parents, they came from single household, and their parents or parent didn't make a lot of money. So there was a huge culture shift from what I understood and what I've seen my whole life to being in a public school and seeing something else.
So could you talk a little bit more about your experience as a Black male in public schools with other African Americans?
Yeah, so we'll do the positive and the negative. Again, I'll piggyback off of this because I think this is actually important to the context of the conversation, but it's this. We were born in a middle class family. Parents made a good amount of money, and at the same time, for a large period of our lives, we were also going to public schools. So by that, I think our education was done well. We learned to, if you will, quick example would be pronunciation and speech, conversation. I remember going to a public school, and the other African Americans there, the other Blacks there, used to always make fun of the way I talked. And quite truthfully, it's because I pronunciated my words differently. My speech was a little bit more proper. I didn't use as much slang, probably any slang at all, right? And so that was like the negative part. And so I was consistently made fun of by other Blacks because of the way I talked. That's the negative. I mean, obviously it wasn't that big of a deal. The positive is my whole life, we went to private schools, which was with predominantly white people, Caucasians. And so going to the public school then, and especially the area that it was at, I was exposed to, Hispanics, I was exposed to like blacks and Asians, and they kind of became my friends, if you will. And so it was different for me, and I will argue it was a culture shock, because now I was hanging with predominantly white people to hanging out with like black guys on my basketball team, and I learned about the culture, right? I knew about it, but I was living in the culture, and I was exposed to it, and learned about like Black history through that, and that was important.
What was it like with your interactions with people who were white and not, I guess, not black?
It's funny. So I talk about black people who would say, "You talk funny." Well, I would have my interactions with people that were white, they would say the same thing, because they were used to blacks speaking in a certain way, or dressing in a certain mold, or acting in a certain demeanor, and I just did not fit any of those stereotypes, if you will. And so I would hear it from the black people, "You talk funny," then I hear it from the white people, like, "Well, you sound proper." Both are wrong, right? Like, to your point, most of my interactions with whites were fine. Like I had white friends, black friends, Asian friends, Mexican friends. All of it was the same.
So, so you grew up here in Vegas, and then your high school experiences, and then you go off to college in California. What was your experience like in California, going to a private college playing basketball?
Right. Again, I would probably categorically say it was the same, and especially in California. It's a very progressive and liberal state, and so in some sense, and I say this tongue in cheek, in some sense it's redemptive in the fact that they're more accepting of everybody. And of course you have racist people everywhere, but my experience in California was very, very positive. People are used to other races, and especially Hispanics. Obviously there's a huge Hispanic population. You have people from Mexico that are coming to Southern California, and yeah, it was a good experience.
So it sounds like your experience in California was good.
Yes.
For the most part. Were there any experiences that weren't good, where you were like, okay, racism is everywhere.
Yeah.
Neither one of us are going to deny that. So give me an example of like where racism happened in progressive California.
Two. I'll give you two. One that happened when I was really young, and you were there as well. So I remember my father, we traveled down to Southern California, to Huntington Beach, and it was our first experience at a beach, and it was a lot of fun. And as we were kind of walking down the coastline or whatnot, I remember there was this Caucasian fellow just off to the side, probably about 20 or 30 feet or so, and he begins to yell publicly that "you N-words," right? And I won't say the real word, but you know what I'm saying. He said, "You N-words do not belong on the beach." And he continued to shout this, "You N-words, get off the beach. You don't belong on the beach." And I remember so graciously and so humbly, my father kind of shielded us, if you will, and we walked off, and his only comments towards that gentleman as he was talking with us, as we were almost debriefing, was, "People are ignorant and you can't change their mind." What gets me about it, as I think about it, the situation is nobody stepped in. Nobody said a word. Nobody wanted to say, "Hey, you're wrong for that." And they became spectators. And not only did they become spectators, there were some people that were so embarrassed about the situation that they kind of they wanted to walk and act like as if it didn't happen. And so I think it's moments like these, and whether you want to talk about race or gender or preference or whatever conversation you want to have, is there's someone in any moment that can be bullied, and it's not the minority that generally has the upper hand, it's the majority that's willing to fight for that minority.
What's the other story you want to share with us when it comes to racism in Southern California?
Yeah, this one probably isn't as racist as it is prejudice, because I think there should be a clear delineation between the two. There's blatant racism,
like the beach,
and then maybe the story that I will tell now is more prejudice and or stereotype. So going off from my undergrad in Southern California, I also played a little bit of high school basketball, and so the coach at the college that I went to, he was just recruiting basketball players. They wanted to rebuild the basketball program, so he recruits, and so I end up at this college in Southern California as a recruit to play basketball. And I remember kind of just playing like in an open gym where a bunch of people from the campus kind of converged into the gym, and we were just kind of just playing hoops. And my team had lost, so I was kind of sitting down and waiting to play the next game. And there was two gentlemen that were actually talking just maybe 2 bleachers behind me. And as they were watching, the gentleman says, "Man, we're going to be really good on our basketball. Our basketball program's going to be really good this year because we have all these black people." And I don't even know if he realized that I was there. So in disbelief, I turned to him like, number one, did you say that? And number two, that might be a compliment, but actually that's offensive.
Yeah.
That's very offensive, because what he was doing is stereotyping the fact that what he sees on TV is what 70-80% of the NBA was African Americans. So he assumed that because we recruited African Americans, our team was going to be really good. I don't even know if we had a 500 season that year. I look at him in disbelief, and then he apologizes like, "I'm sorry, man." And then he tries to cover it and justify it, but it's a good thing. We're going to be really good, and I believe in our program. And I kind of just shrugged my shoulders like, well, if that's what you believe about our program, at the mere fact that we have black people, because I've seen white people that are really good players too, right? Despite color of skin. But that was a kind of a moment in California where I was just like, all right, like it's out there. There's prejudice and there's racism, and for you as a viewer have to be really aware that it still happens today. And for us to kind of just shelve that off to the side like, oh, they're playing the victim. No, we grew up with our father telling us we're never victims. And we have that mindset. We aren't. But just because a whole group of people are saying victim, 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 and you just shelve that as stop playing the victim, maybe there's truth to what they're saying. Maybe there's an element of this is the reality. And I think having a conversation about it is where we move forward. Not just throwing off to the side like, those people.
So Mike, any final thoughts that you wanted to share with everybody before we sign off?
Sure, I'll end with a story. And this happened like a month ago. I went to like a local video game place, and I was playing like just the basketball competitions, like for the highest score. And so I had some tokens and I played a few rounds, and I think I was like in my 3rd or 4th round I was playing. And I was just missing a ton of shots, just like brick after brick after brick. And there was a gentleman, probably in his mid-30s, maybe early 40s, that walked by behind me, a white gentleman, and he said this, I don't know him. We haven't had a conversation. I don't know his name. He doesn't know mine. As I was missing the basketball, he said, "Oh, you're gonna get your black card pulled," right? So a gentleman that I do not know makes a statement about me missing the basketball continuously and saying my black card needs to get pulled because I wasn't good at playing basketball. And to be truthful, there's things like that happen on a regular basis. I wouldn't consider that racism, but I would consider that, again, that's a prejudice. So to all the viewers out there, I would say, be very careful about how you think about different groups. Yeah, racial groups, but just ethnic groups. But there's a ton of different categories, gender, however you want to place them. But be very careful about how you think about them, and even the things that we say, because while it was a well-meaning joke and he wasn't being mean at all, I've heard things like that my whole life. And so for him to make that comment again, it's just like, oh, that's another prejudiced comment and something that I have to laugh off.
Well, everybody, thank you guys so much for tuning in to another week. And remember, he is not the better looking one. But other than that, like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, and tell me what you think. Hopefully you guys watch all 4 episodes of Being Black in America. And I hope it brings value to your life. Really cool thing, really quick. I just got an email this morning from a lady saying that she is so thankful for this channel, that she is really gaining value from it, you know, and how she's really proud that someone's out here doing something like this. And so I hope I bring the same value to you. And if I do, hopefully I can bring it to others. So please share it on Facebook, let others know. And until next time, Math is out.